What is the meaning of life? It's a pretty classic philosophical question. And humans have been considering this and mulling this over for thousands of years. Some people just still cannot figure it out. In our culture today, we see people searching for identity, purpose, and belonging in all sorts of various places, oftentimes to their own detriment. Young people especially look for it, but some people, even in later life, still don't feel that they have meaning. People ask questions. What do I want to do with my life? Who do I want to be? These questions all pertain to the deeper meaning of our time here on this earth. Throughout the years, people have reached many different conclusions about this always pertinent question. The world teaches us that the contentment that we seek can be attained through various different means. For some, the meaning of life is to attain wealth. If I get faster cars, bigger houses, better gadgets, nicer clothes, more stocks, more cold hard cash. If I buy more, then I will be fulfilled. For others, it's quite simple. To be happy or seek pleasure. As long as their mood is positive and they are all good, no deeper meaning needed. That's life. And even still, some seek knowledge and wisdom. Through academics or work, they continue to learn more and more. And some might see this as an admirable life goal. Yet what does that amount to in the end? As Christians, we know these are all aspects of life, wealth, happiness, knowledge, but they're not the meaning of life. We can spend our time doing any combination of those things and never find true fulfillment. The meaning of life goes much deeper than these things. And the book of Ecclesiastes, selfishly one of my favorite books, addresses this topic head on, the meaning of life. You can go ahead and turn there. Ecclesiastes is where we're going to be this morning. This book, for a little background, is written by the preacher. That's what he calls himself, and he identifies himself as Solomon, who we might be familiar with. This Old Testament book is recounting his life and all the lessons that Solomon has learned. We know Solomon was the son of David, and David was a man after God's own heart. We know that he started his reign in Israel shortly after or during the peak of Israel, depending on how you define that. And he inherited near infinite resources and a relatively peaceful Philistine-free land during his reign. He had the same question. What is the purpose of humanity? Why are we here on this earth at all? And as king over Israel, at the height of its power, he had access to essentially infinite resources, or as much as anyone would need to fully explore what life has to offer. For a little background real quickly, we'll go to 1 Kings chapter 10, verse 4. That's 1 Kings chapter 10, verse 4. It says, "And when the queen of Sheba had seen all the wisdom of Solomon, the house he had built, the food of his table, the seating of his officials, and the attendance of his servants, their clothing, his cupbearers, and his burnt offerings that he offered at the house of the Lord, there was no more breath in her. And she said to the king, the report was true that I heard in my own land of your words and of your wisdom. But I did not believe the reports until I came and my own eyes had seen it. And behold, the half was not told me. Your wisdom and prosperity surpass the report that I heard." There's one person who could examine the different passions and interests available in this life. It would be someone in the position of Solomon, a ruler. And so in the book of Ecclesiastes, Solomon records his thoughts and journey as he searches for the meaning of life in wisdom, pleasure, and wealth. Surely someone with limitless access to everything around them would find something to be totally fulfilling, right? Something totally long-lasting and worth their time and effort. But as we will read this morning, Solomon seems very pessimistic about all of these experiments that he does. And a little spoiler alert for Ecclesiastes, if you haven't read it, as he recounts all that he did in his life, Solomon comes to the conclusion that all is vanity except for one singular pursuit in this life. There is one thing that is worth your time to pursue every single day of your life. So first, let's go ahead and look at Solomon's pursuit of wisdom. That's a pretty good place to start, to feel fulfilled. We see people today with lots of knowledge and skills. They're revered, and they're held up on a pedestal. They're respected for their knowledge, their expertise, and people turn to them for advice. Think of doctors, lawyers, engineers, anyone with a PhD. Those are respected by those around them for their knowledge and for their ability. And in a personal sense, we all know, knowing things feels good. It's fun to be right, or know the right things at the right time. So Solomon thinks maybe that, skills, wisdom, knowledge, maybe chasing that feeling will be worth his time. In Ecclesiastes chapter 1, starting in verse 12, he says, I, the preacher, have been king over Israel in Jerusalem, and I applied my heart to seek and to search out by wisdom all that is done under heaven. It is an unhappy business that God has given to the children of man to be busy with. I have seen everything that is done under the sun, and behold, all is vanity and a striving after wind. What is crooked cannot be made straight, and what is lacking cannot be counted. I said in my heart, I have acquired great wisdom, surpassing all who were over Jerusalem before me, and my heart has had great experience of wisdom and knowledge. And I applied my heart to know wisdom and to know madness and folly. I perceived that this also is but a striving after wind. For in much wisdom is much vexation, and he who increases knowledge increases sorrow. We can see from the wording of this passage that Solomon is looking back on this little endeavor that he's had with some disappointment. What he thought would make him feel right ended up being a striving after wind. It's useless. You can't catch wind. And so wisdom is ultimately vanity. That's his conclusion. So he concludes, maybe ignorance is bliss. After all, the more you know, the more vexation you have in your life. I might add that Solomon isn't making the point that literally nobody should ever seek wisdom in their life, and that these things are 100% useless for life. We know that other scriptures show us that these things, such as wisdom, can be very rewarding and useful tools in our life. But rather, he is simply realizing that the things that seem to be rewarding and good in the present will not be long-lasting and are therefore vain. Wisdom is not literally of no value, but rather is not that important in the grand scheme of things. And he expands on that idea in chapter 2, verse 12. You go ahead and turn over there. Chapter 2, verse 12. Continuing this idea of wisdom and considering how much it's worth. He says, So I turned to consider wisdom and madness and folly. For what can the man do who comes after the king? Only what has already been done. Then I saw that there is more gain in wisdom than in folly, as there is more gain in light than in darkness. The wise person has his eyes in his head, but the fool walks in darkness. And yet I perceive that the same event happens to all of them. Then I said in my heart, what happens to the fool will happen to me also. Why then have I been so very wise? And I said in my heart that this also is vanity. For of the wise as of the fool there is no enduring remembrance, seeing that in the days to come all will have been long forgotten. How the wise dies just like the fool. So I hated life, because what is done under the sun was grievous to me, for all is vanity and a striving after wind. He has that same conclusion there. All is vanity, a striving after wind. Wisdom doesn't cut it. It's not going to fulfill us. It feels rewarding for a time, but the wise man dies just like the fool. So if knowledge amounts to nothing in the end, Solomon decides to move on to something else, broaden his search, and experiment with the pleasures of life. Pleasure is a natural place to search for meaning in life. As we mentioned earlier, many people today simply just want to be happy. That's all they care about. As long as they're happy, they are good. They don't need anything deeper. Well, Solomon thought that might be a good idea too. So he chased any and every pleasure, beginning in chapter 2, going back actually to verse 1. He says, I said in my heart, come now, I will test you with pleasure. Enjoy yourself. But behold, this also was vanity. I said of laughter, it is mad. And of pleasure, what use is it? I searched my heart, how to cheer my body with wine, my heart still guiding me with wisdom, and how to lay hold on folly, till I might see what was good for the children of man to do under heaven during the few days of their life. I made great works. I built houses and planted vineyards for myself. I made myself gardens and parks and planted in them all kinds of fruit trees. I made myself pools from which to water the forest of growing trees. I bought male and female slaves and had slaves who were born in my house. I had also great possessions, herds and flocks, more than anyone who had been before me in Jerusalem. I also gathered for myself silver and gold and the treasure of kings and provinces. I got singers, both men and women, and many concubines, the delight of the sons of man. So I became great and surpassed all who were before me in Jerusalem. Also my wisdom remained with me, and whatever my eyes desired, I did not keep from them. I kept my heart from no pleasure, for my heart found pleasure in all my toil, and this was my reward for all my toil. Then I considered all that my hands had done, and the toil I had expended in doing it, and behold, all was vanity and a striving after wind, and there was nothing to be gained under the sun. As we read earlier, Solomon was literally breathtakingly wealthy. That's what the Queen of Sheba said. He was breathtaking, and so he used that to his advantage. He figured he had so much money, so much resources, he might as well use it for something. And so he simultaneously pursued pleasure and material possessions all at once. In these verses, we see this very modern attitude, actually, of more that we see here in America. We need more houses, parks, gardens, vineyards, fruit trees, servants, flocks, more herds, more singers, treasure, silver, gold, even concubines. Then when all that work was done, what did it mean? It was all vain, striving after wind. This attitude of more is highly prevalent in our society today. We're all guilty of buying something that we really thought we needed, we really thought we wanted it, and it just sits in your closet if it's clothes or a tool you never use, some gadget. We're all guilty of that. Solomon came to this conclusion that we need to know this today. Contentment is key even if we are richly blessed. Just be content. Despite experiencing all the pleasures of life, essentially hedonism, he pretty much covered all those bases. His lasting fulfillment could never come from something so temporary and fleeting as pleasures and possessions. We actually have a similar conclusion reached in the New Testament by Jesus. If you go ahead and turn to Matthew. Jesus agrees with this conclusion here. Wealth will never be the purpose of life because it is not as valuable as an eternal salvation. Not even comparable. You could have so much money in this world, just like Solomon, and it would not even hold a flame to eternal salvation. In Matthew chapter 19, verse 16, we hear the story of the rich young ruler, which I'm sure many of us are familiar with. And behold, a man came up to him saying, "Teacher, what good deed must I do to have eternal life?" And he said to him, "Why do you ask me about what is good? There is only one who is good. If you would enter life, keep the commandments." He said to him, "Which ones?" And Jesus said, "You shall not murder, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not steal, you shall not bear false witness, honor your father and mother, and you shall love your neighbor as yourself." The young man said to him, "All these I have kept. What do I still lack?" Jesus said to him, "If you would be perfect, go, sell what you possess, and give to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven, and come follow me." When the young man heard this, he went away sorrowful, for he had great possessions. We see this parallel here, similar to Solomon. He had great possessions, he just didn't quite want to give them up. Jesus knew the truth, but both Solomon and this rich young ruler were still figuring it out. Wealth is a tool that can be used for some gain for some time on this earth, but it is not worth as much as a relationship with God. Never will be. We don't know what happened to the rich young ruler after he went away. The Bible never gives us an update. We never know his final decision, whether he decided to throw away his old life and follow Christ or not. But we can only hope that he realized how foolish those priorities were and how short-sighted that mindset is. And that we can hope that he acted accordingly. So after all these endeavors, we can only imagine the frustration of Solomon at this point, right? If you put yourself in his shoes, you'd think that he could figure out something to fulfill himself. It's fair to assume that it took years to build all those parks and accrue all this possessions and knowledge. In the modern day, we see wealthy people, celebrities, and we kind of just assume their life is perfect, that they got it all figured out. They don't have to worry about money or anything. And I'm sure the Israelites of that day did as well, looking at Solomon. They're like, he's so happy. He's got it all figured out. I'm sure he feels fulfilled. But to be Solomon have access to everything, still come to the conclusion that nothing is worth devoting your life to, has got to be infuriating. And like we pointed out earlier, a lot of that exasperation can be seen through this text. The negativity and the mentioning of vanity is all throughout Ecclesiastes, as Solomon recounts his life. So it's all vanity, right? The point of life is nothing. There is no point of life. We're just here to work and do whatever we want, and some people figure it out and some people don't. Well, no. Solomon thought almost nothing was worth devoting his life to. Almost. Because his conclusion at the end of the book takes a very positive turn when Solomon finally realizes some fundamental truths about the world and God. This entire time, through all this experimenting and introspection, Solomon is just trying to figure the world out, just as many of us are today. He's been so blessed by God, and that should make him happy. Yet at the same time, he sees that everything eventually comes to an end, and it just isn't satisfying. He gains wisdom, he sees the use of it, but also remarks that ultimately the wise man dies just like the fool does. He begins to question what God is up to. Why have we been put in this situation? Why does life sometimes seem random and chaotic, other times smooth, blessed, orderly? Why can he not just find lasting peace if he is able to do so much? Unfortunately, we cannot get to every single tidbit of wisdom and comparisons in this book. I truly wish we could. But skipping ahead to chapter 8, we start to see some of the final conclusions that all this research has led him up to. Keep in mind that everything up until this point has been a search for things that are worthwhile and things that just make sense. Ecclesiastes chapter 8, verse 14, there is a vanity that takes place on earth, that there are righteous people to whom it happens according to the deeds of the wicked, and there are wicked people to whom it happens according to the deeds of the righteous. I said that this also is vanity, and I commend joy, for man has nothing better under the sun but to eat and drink and be joyful. For this will go with him in his toil through the days of his life that God has given him under the sun. So we see here this classic question that many deal with today. We kind of hear this as a common objection to Christianity, actually. Why do bad things happen to good people? It's addressed quite directly here. Solomon actually doesn't really give us an answer why. He kind of goes around that, instead offers a solution, just to eat, drink, and be joyful and appreciate what God has given us. And Ecclesiastes starts to Solomon sees value in appreciating and thanking God for what he does for us, even though things might not always be fair. And Ecclesiastes starts to turn into this excellent source of wisdom as we consider our priorities in this life. It highlights how fleeting the things that some devote their whole lives to really are. The things that some deem the utmost priority, such as wealth to the rich young ruler, that was his number one priority. They're insignificant in the eyes of God. It's not what he's worried about. Continuing on in verse 16, it says, when I applied my heart to know wisdom, and to see the business that is done on earth, how neither day nor night do one's eyes see sleep, then I saw all the work of God, that man cannot find out the work that is done under the sun. However much man may toil in seeking, he will not find it out. Even though a wise man claims to know, he cannot find it out. So Solomon at this point, he's processed these experiences. He's considered the impact of wealth, wisdom, foolishness, the randomness of life, and more. And the wisest, most knowledgeable man in the whole world admits this. You can't figure it all out. You can't do it. You can't know every way that God is working behind the scenes. You can't know the reason behind anything that happens to you. You just can't know. Even the wise man, it says, does not know. The truth about life is that it won't always make sense or be fair. But it doesn't need to be, because we cannot control the things that happen to us, only our reactions. So we must be diligent and righteous in all that we do. We've alluded to Solomon's final conclusion about life a couple times here this morning. We finally arrived. This is Ecclesiastes chapter 12, verse 9. Ecclesiastes chapter 12, verse 9. It says, besides being wise, the preacher also taught the people knowledge, weighing studying and arranging many proverbs with great care. The preacher sought to find words of delight, and uprightly he wrote words of truth. The words of the wise are like goads, and like nails firmly fixed are the collected sayings. They are given by one shepherd. My son, beware of anything beyond these. Of making many books there is no end, and much study is a weariness of the flesh. The end of the matter, all has been heard. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. For God will bring every deed into judgment with every secret thing, whether good or evil. That's it. That is the meaning of life. That is the purpose and direction in this life. The man who had everything in the world came to this conclusion that you have nothing without God's guidance in your life. It is the only thing that leads to eternal salvation. Wealth, pleasure, knowledge, they all pass away, but God will not. Ecclesiastes was, of course, before Jesus came to earth and died for our sins, a couple thousand years before that. So we have all the more reason to follow God now. We quite literally owe our lives to him. The wages of sin is death, and Jesus, in love, stepped in for us, paid for our eternal salvation with his own life, and was resurrected 3 days later. Even still, this side of the cross, God's commandments are crucial to our lives. And this is the whole duty of man, remember? In 2 John, verse 1, back to the New Testament, 2 John, chapter 1, verse 6, it says, "And this is love, that we walk according to his commandments. This is the commandment, just as you have heard from the beginning, so that you should walk in it. For many deceivers have gone out into the world, those who do not confess the coming of Jesus Christ in the flesh. Such a one is the deceiver and the Antichrist. Watch yourselves, that you may not lose what we have worked for, but may win a full reward. Everyone who goes on ahead and does not abide in the teaching of Christ does not have God. Whoever abides in the teaching has both the Father and the Son." I'm sure we all know this. Life gets distracting sometimes. We lose sight of our mission to follow God and keep his commandments. We get caught up in wealth or knowledge or stuff, just like Solomon did. We get caught up in it, we start focusing on that. Sometimes to snap ourselves out of it, we need a perspective switch, just as Solomon had, and that rich young ruler was provided. Switch your perspective. Skip all that experimentation with the vain pursuits in your life. Solomon's already done it. It's not worth it. What is actually important? Our relationship with God, his statutes, his word, spreading the gospel. Without these things, our life is but a vapor. It's a striving after wind. It comes and it goes. So as we go through our lives, constantly remind yourself. You must constantly remind yourself. What is important to God, and why am I really here? The world offers many answers to that are dead wrong. Just pitiful distractions. We are here to fear God and keep his commandments. That is, as Solomon would say, the end of the matter. It's simply tragic that many will not realize that the purpose and direction that they have been seeking has been written down here for thousands of years. All of the sin that we let consume ourselves, just a sad replacement for the God that we need in our lives. As Christians, we have a duty to let those who are living a life of sin know that there is hope through Jesus. Some of us here this morning may not have begun this relationship with God yet, or they've let that relationship grow weaker. Maybe some of us are still searching for meaning in all the vain pursuits of life. We need to be snapped out of it. Will not be found there. Meaning and purpose will not be found in sin. Jesus says, "I am the way, the truth, and the life, and no one comes to the Father except through me."